Hey, it's Matt from Hidden Machine, and this is another installment in our Remedy Connected Universe series. These videos are all bits and pieces taken from a larger piece published back in late 2021. It was a 3-hour long breakdown and analysis of the entire Remedy Connected Universe. This series takes a lot of that same content and is chopping it up for you to bite into in, little digestible nuggets, so you don't have to take a whole 3 damn hours of your day at a time to check out what's going on in the Remedy Connected Universe. Now, last time around, we checked out Alan Wake. We talked about the plot, and we also talked about the live-action web series, Bright Falls, that came out right before the game. And in our previous videos, we looked at Remedy's very first game, Death Rally, and then we looked at their next 2 games, Max Payne 1 and Max Payne 2, The Fall of Max Payne. In those videos, we gave full breakdowns of the plot, and then we did an analysis and looked at the themes and talked about how they all connect to one another and the Remedy Connected Universe and all the meta-narratives and everything that's going on there with Norse mythology, and there's a lot there. And there's a lot here in Alan Wake as well. So we did the plot summary in our last video, but today's video will be the analysis. We're going to look deeper at some of the themes and lore in Alan Wake and start to discuss how they relate to both Max Payne and also Quantum Break and Control. You see, each game in the Remedy Connected Universe kind of connects this way and that way, but also this way and this way too. It's moving all over the place, and it's hard to really nail down in a concise way, but hopefully by the end of the series, you'll have a better understanding of how the whole thing sort of works, at least enough for you to start to develop your own theories, and hey, maybe you can teach me something about the whole damn thing. Anyway, today we're going to look at Alan Wake, the analysis, and after that, there's going to be some talk about the books and comics that accompanied the game. And it's some really cool world building, and you're going to see some really interesting stuff and seeds being planted for the ideas that would come to fruition in 2019's Control. But that's what we're looking forward to in this video. Let's get into it. Admittedly, that's a very truncated version of the events that take place in Alan Wake. As the technological capabilities of computers and game consoles increase, so does the complexity of Remedy's storytelling. Like all Remedy games, the story of Alan Wake would best be experienced firsthand. I'm really only giving a recap here in this video for context. In terms of gameplay and design, Alan Wake clearly builds on the foundations set by Max Payne 1 and 2. There's the third-person camera perspective, the way that guns and ammo are treated as plentiful and somewhat disposable, rather than having any sort of complex inventory management systems. Even the fonts used on the game HUD are very familiar. An upgraded version of the in-game television show trope makes another appearance, alongside the addition of an in-game radio show hosted by a local DJ named Pat Main. The televisions in Alan Wake present episodes of a Twilight Zone-inspired anthology program called Night Springs, as well as something called The Writer in the Cabin. There are 9 episodes of Night Springs scattered throughout Alan Wake, and much like the TV shows found in Max Payne 2 were an echo of the story in that game, you can find different elements of the Alan Wake story present in some of these Night Springs episodes. Let's watch one together right now.
Are we men dreaming of being butterflies, or butterflies that dream of being men? Such philosophical concerns are by necessity abstract. And yet, some of us can find concrete proof of the nature of our existence in Night Springs. Tonight's episode, an absence of creativity.
Hello, Martha. What did you want to show me?
Oh, Lydia, thank God you're here. Please, it's in the basement.
Martha! Oh, that's amazing.
Isn't it just? I found it here this morning.
It's like it isn't there, but oh, I can't look straight at it.
Yes, I'm sorry about that.
Oh, how did you get here?
Well, I'm trying to work.
Did you put this thing here?
In a way. To be more precise, I put everything here but that.
Really? But what is it?
Oh, I guess the temptation is to call it a hole, but it's really an absence, a profound lack of reality.
In Martha's basement?
Yes, I was doing so well, too. I came up with 2 old ladies and put something really weird in the basement. It was a great start, but I'm completely blocked now. I can't imagine what I was up to.
Well, surely it's just an ordinary basement.
Is it? Why did you call your friend here, then?
Well, I don't know.
Oh, well.
Couldn't you just ignore it?
Oh, no, I couldn't do that. It would probably turn into a plot hole. Might be one already. Could sink the whole enterprise.
Oh my.
Listen, ladies, not to be rude, but I'm really not at all sure where I'm going with this, and you're just not helping. You should just go back upstairs for a cup of coffee while I try to figure out what I'm up to.
Well, if you think that's best.
Maybe I should just stop here. Or is that too moronic?
Is that too moronic? Indeed. Who can tell? It's a fine line between the stupid and the sublime. In Night Springs.
While the true nature of Alan's powers are still somewhat murky even by the end of the game, this episode of Night Springs is an obvious nod to the idea of Alan's written word having an effect on reality. Other ideas explored in these episodes include an interpretation of someone becoming one of the Taken.
What? I don't understand. What did I do? I just wanted to get a job in the service industry.
Wow, you're gonna serve all right.
No!
Time loops.
Watch out for the drug!
My God, Mark?
No, please! God, no! Linda!
Thanks for the ride, Mark. I'm so glad to be leaving this place.
What, Night Springs? Come on, Linda, relax. It's not that bad. Hey, what's that up ahead?
Oh, God. There's someone in the road. I think there's been an accident. Are you all right?
Oh no, Linda! Oh no! It was me on the road! Wait! Tell him to watch out for the truck! Watch out for the truck!
Murderous doppelgangers.
When you took him to the game, but the white shirt is on the dead guy.
It's plenty red now.
You won't get away with this.
Do you really think that's in any way relevant to me? I had plenty of time to talk to my boy before the cops arrived, you know? He won't stop screaming, am I right? You think he's ever gonna be okay? I left my mark. Believe
You
me.
bastard.
What? You gonna shoot me? What's the point? I'm going to prison. You got me.
I don't understand any of this.
And you never will. Don't worry. Maybe you'll see me again, Agent. Maybe in the mirror.
And quantum physics.
Ladies and gentlemen of the press, I am Dr. Barclay Colvin, and I'm glad so many of you could join me here at the Moorcock Institute. Tonight, I'm going to give a practical demonstration of the many worlds interpretation. As you can see, this is a loaded 9mm pistol. It shall be part of a thought experiment. And now, a real experiment, known as a quantum suicide.
The inclusion of these live-action elements is very entertaining, but they become even more striking when we view the Writer in the Cabin videos. Although it's never explicitly stated in the game, I believe that these 7 videos that you encounter throughout the story give a glimpse into the week that Alan spent writing in the cabin while under the spell of Barbara Jagger. On a first playthrough, it can be difficult to really piece it all together because there's large chunks of gameplay and narrative in between each encounter you have with these videos. To summarize the events of these Writer in the Cabin videos, Alan has returned to the cabin after diving into Cauldron Lake in an attempt to rescue Alice. He sees that everything outside of the cabin is enveloped in darkness, so he decides to stay inside and write. He feels a great deal of responsibility as a writer, and he knows that his story has to have balance, that all of the elements need to make sense, and that after a certain point, a story becomes a living thing, and so it can be very difficult to tame. He tells himself that he can bring Alice back by writing the correct story. He also believes that he has an editor with him, someone he calls Barbara Jagger. Alan begins to feel ill, realizing that he can hardly do anything but write. At one point, he finds a shoebox full of poems by a writer named Thomas Zane. He decides that certain elements of Zane's writing can fit into his story, but Alan is also finding himself increasingly influenced by Barbara Jagger. Eventually, Alan realizes that his editor is a dark presence, merely wearing the facade of Barbara Jagger as a disguise. This dark presence has been lying to and manipulating Alan into writing the story that it wants. The dark presence intends to use Alan's power as a writer to break into reality and wreak havoc on our world. Alan believes that by writing himself into the story as the protagonist, he can save Alice and prevent the dark presence from entering reality. The final cutscene in the game shows Alan still at the typewriter inside of the cabin. If you look at the windows, you can see that the cabin is still enveloped in darkness. Earlier in the game, we learn that Cauldron Lake was formed by a volcanic eruption. In 1970, an earthquake occurred, causing the cabin and the island beneath it to disappear. If this were the case, then how did Alan and Alice enter the cabin in the first place? That's a question for another time, but it's certainly something to consider. My focus in this video is to introduce both the official and implied versions of the Remedy Connected Universe, but in doing so, we'll inevitably uncover a number of mysteries, paradoxes, and unanswered questions. This is the true magic of the Remedy universe, the complex mysteries that it presents to those willing to dive deep enough into the spiral. Overall presentation and the appearance of in-game television shows aren't the only things linking Alan Wake to the Max Payne series. Alan Wake is sort of at the center of the Remedy Connected Universe. The game acts as a portal between both the past and future of Remedy. The first clue to all of this appears in the opening minutes of Alan Wake. In the introductory tutorial section of the game, Alan is in a dream. In this dream, he struck a hitchhiker with his car, and the hitchhiker disappeared. When the player first gains control of Alan, they can choose to walk forward and progress the game. However, if they turn around and go backwards, they will see that coming from the trunk of Alan's car is a scattered pile of books. The books are all copies of The Sudden Stop, the final Alex Casey novel. As I said earlier, Alan is famous for writing a series of crime thrillers starring the detective Alex Casey. The cover of this book is extremely similar to the box art for Max Payne 2, The Fall of Max Payne. At this point in Alan Wake, we don't really know anything about Alex Casey, so this could be interpreted as just a subtle reference to Remedy's previous game. But throughout the story, we learn a bit more about Alex Casey. We find a few pages from The Sudden Stop and discover that Alex Casey's story is very similar to the story of Max Payne. Both characters are involved with a certain femme fatale, and both have lost their wife and baby. We also see that both characters used dual Berettas. Again, this could all be seen as just an Easter egg and nothing more than a little in-joke for fans. But when we find these Sudden Stop manuscript pages, they aren't read aloud in Alan's voice like all of the other manuscript pages. They are instead read in the voice of Max Payne, as portrayed by actor James McCaffrey.
This was a late goodbye. 13 years after I'd gotten my revenge, it had finally caught up with me. It had been a long time to bear the pain. My blood painted the snow red. A gruesome slushy dissolved all the scattered painkillers and leisurely dripped down to the sewer, mingling with the bile of the city, becoming one with it. I can see them now. My wife and my baby. Honey, I'm home.
Alex Casey is Max Payne in everything but name, and I can only assume that the only reason for that is that Remedy no longer holds the rights to the character. When viewed through the understanding that Alex Casey is Max Payne, it leads one to question which plane of reality the Max Payne games took place in regards to the Remedy-connected universe. Were the things that Max Payne experienced a direct result of Alan's writing? Are the Max Payne games just a first-person retelling of a fictional story? Or could they be both? Now, I should note that, personally speaking, I don't believe Alex Casey and Max Payne are the exact same character, but rather I think that they are spiritually the same character, and that Alex Casey is a sort of alternate timeline or alternate universe version of the Max Payne character. We'll definitely revisit this idea later on in the video, but when pondering the answers, one can draw some interesting parallels between Alan Wake as a creator and Sam Lake and Remedy as creators. Wanting to do something different for his next book, Alan surprised fans by killing off Alex Casey. Now, Remedy didn't kill off Max Payne, but they did cut ties with the character in favor of doing something different. Alan's long period of writer's block can be seen as a sort of parallel to the difficulties that Remedy faced in deciding what type of game Alan Wake should be. Alan Wake had been in production for years before Remedy decided that they would be ditching the open world format in favor of a linear story. Even the names Alan Wake and Sam Lake are similar. While it's no accident that Alan's name can be abbreviated to read as Awake, it's also worth noting that Sam Lake is a pen name used by Sami Järvi, with Järvi being a Finnish word for lake. While I assume that a lot of this is just coincidence, it's interesting to think of that echo effect that we keep talking about and seeing it break into reality like this. It's also very interesting to see that Remedy used Alan Wake to expand on one of the more surreal parts of the Max Payne games. Max Payne features several sections of gameplay that take place in these dreamlike realms. In these sections, Max is forced to explore the depths of his own psyche, confronting some of his deepest fears and weaknesses. These areas are a huge part of what allowed Max Payne to be more than just an action game. The idea of turning inward and literally facing the darker parts of your mind is at the core of Alan Wake and its subsequent DLC episodes, and we'll see echoes of that in other Remedy games as well. It should also be noted that much like Max Payne made references to Norse mythology, Alan Wake contains its share of mythological references as well. Alfred Woden was an allusion to Odin, and in Alan Wake, Odin Anderson is an even more overt allusion to that same god, along with his brother Thor being a clear reference to Thor. The Andersons referred to the dark presence as Baba Yaga, a witch from Slavic folklore who lived in a cabin held up by birds' legs. The bird leg cabin from the first episode of Alan Wake sits atop a cauldron lake. There's a lot more going on in Alan Wake in terms of symbolism and literary references, and we'll touch more on some of those later. The story of Alan Wake is one that's told through many different forms of media. We start off with the Bright Falls web series, which leads directly into the game Alan Wake. Included in the Steam edition of the game are two comics titled Psycho Thriller and Night Springs. In Alan Wake, Dr. Emil Hartman is swept away by the Dark Presence and is never seen again in the game. The Psycho Thriller comic lets us know that Dr. Emil Hartman survived the blackout at Cauldron Lake Lodge, and also gives a few more bits of information that will be crucial to people trying to piece together some of the deeper mysteries of the Remedy-connected universe. The Night Springs comic introduces us to Frank Breaker, who is the father of Sheriff Sarah Breaker. When Sheriff Breaker becomes aware of the Dark Presence and decides to help Alan and Barry reach the Lady of the Light, she tasks Barry with making phone calls to some people that she believes can help with the situation. Near the top of that list is Frank Breaker, and the Night Springs comic shows what happens when he's called into action. It also suggests that the Breaker family isn't totally unfamiliar with the supernatural, which is another thread that we'll follow up on later in this video. Alan Wake was followed by two DLC expansions, or special episodes if you will, titled The Signal and The Writer. These two stories take place directly after the events of Alan Wake. Alan is stuck in the dark place and is doing all he can to figure out the rules of this realm that he finds himself in. He's not entirely alone, though. Throughout Alan Wake and the accompanying DLC episodes, Alan is regularly visited by the voice of the poet Thomas Zane. Throughout the game, this voice, which initially takes the form of a guiding light, eventually reveals himself to be a man in an old-timey diving suit. Zane has also been cast into the dark place, and while his intentions aren't always clear, he does appear to pass on what knowledge he's gained to help Alan survive. It's also interesting to note that Thomas Zane is voiced by James McCaffrey, the same voice actor who portrayed Max Payne. This idea of a poet named Tom who communicates with the protagonist through some supernatural means is very reminiscent of True Tom Reimer from Remedy's first game, Death Rally. While I don't think there's any canonical connection between the games or the characters, this is another example of an idea echoing throughout different Remedy titles. The DLC episodes serve as a sort of training ground for Alan. He begins to learn the ins and outs of the Dark Place after rescuing Alice, and by the end of the DLCs, he's ready to write a new manuscript titled Return. The special edition of Alan Wake is accompanied by a book called the Alan Wake Files. This book was written by a man named Clay Stewart. At some point around 2010, Clay started having what he believed to be a series of shared dreams with Alan Wake. One of these dreams is actually presented in the opening tutorial section of the game. Alan briefly meets Clay before the hitchhiker that Alan struck with his car takes Clay out with an axe. One could be forgiven for forgetting this seemingly inconsequential character, but it's important to remember that very little in a Remedy game is actually inconsequential or unrelated to the greater narrative. Feeling drawn to Bright Falls, Clay arrives there just days after the events of the game. He stays in a motel room that was previously used by former FBI agent Robert Nightingale. Clay opens up a vent in the room and happens upon the field notes taken by Nightingale. Alan also passes through this room as well in the game, and keen-eyed players can see the vent that at the time is still holding Nightingale's notes. In Clay's book, the Alan Wake Files, we can find these field notes, some selections of Alan Wake's writing, a copy of The Creator's Dilemma by Emil Hartman, and some historical information on Bright Falls and Cauldron Lake. It's a really incredible companion piece, and it goes to show how far Remedy is willing to go when it comes to world building.